1st, 2020, it being 6 o'clock, Brockton School Committee, if we could please stand and salute our American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd ask you please stand, continue standing. We are going to take a moment of silence for two fine educators that unfortunately passed too early. Brian Rogan, principal at Kennedy School, his wake and his funeral was this week up in Northborough. It was well attended by Brockton Public School personnel. It was really a wonderful event. And we also lost Jimmy Wooten, bilingual teacher down at South Middle School. Our thoughts and prayers are with Mr. Rogan and Mr. Wooten. May they rest in peace. Thank you, members of the committee. We are going to open up to the hearing of visitors. We do have one sign-in, which is Kim Gibson, President of the BEA. However, I am going to ask if Kim doesn't mind to just sit tight for 1 second, because Dr. Rick Herman is here, and Dr. Herman is our medical consultant. He has another event he needs to do tonight, but he was kind enough to drop something and come over at the request of the school committee and, of course, Superintendent and myself. Dr. Rick, if you don't know Dr. Rick, you're missing out. Great guy, number one, but unbelievable medical professional. Used to be former chief of ER at Brockton Hospital, Signature Healthcare, and also chief of ER over at Good Samaritan. And I called him and asked him if he would be a consultant for the city of Brockton when the pandemic came, and he did accept, and I'm so happy that he did. So between him and Dr. Cahill, again, Linda Cahill has a doctorate in nursing. We're in good hands right now. But Dr. Herman is here tonight to answer questions, give an update relative to COVID. Dr. Herman, the floor is yours over at the podium. Good evening.
Good evening. How's that?
Excellent.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you all for inviting me. As Mayor said, I have been around the city of Brockton for 40 years as an emergency physician. And over the past 4 or 5 years, I've also done a lot of telemedicine as I'm transitioning into the second half of my career. And so I now have taken care of folks with COVID concerns in 21 states around the country. And I am the parent of a college kid, and so I do have concerns, like everyone does, about students going back to school. Unfortunately, my student is in a state where they don't quite believe in science and feel that wearing a face mask is an infringement on personal liberties, so it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. And also continue to work in the emergency department at Good Sam here in town. I've enjoyed working with the mayor over the last 3 months and have gotten involved with everything from planning youth sports to the food market and Brockton Rocks and now the school system, and try to keep up on the daily figures as best we can, being in contact frequently with the hospitals, the health centers, the nursing homes, and looking at the data on a daily basis to try and figure out what are the thresholds that we need to observe based on testing rates, number of new cases, hospitalizations, capacity in the ICUs, so that we can know if we're moving ahead in a good way or if we need to really take a closer look at things and scale things back. So with that being said, as I've said before, I've been an emergency room doctor for 40 years and feel pretty comfortable in dealing with emergency medicine. I've been a COVID doctor for 4 months and do not know what I'm doing most of the time. I've seen people who are in respiratory failure and need to go on a ventilator, and I see people with nothing less than a sniffle who test positive. So this is a disease that we're all learning from, I'm learning from, which is why if you ask me a question, don't be surprised if I say, I don't know, or we don't know. We meaning globally, science these days don't know. And one more thing I will add is my mom was an English teacher in the public school system for 30 years, so I feel like I'm at least in a welcoming environment.
Thank you, Dr. Herman. I know there's some questions. I know Attorney Tom Minicello from Ward 1 had asked a question at the last retreat that we had last week. So the floor is yours, Attorney Minicello.
Hi, Doctor. Welcome aboard. Appreciate having you here. With respect to our students and some students that may have immune deficiency, medications that might deal with colitis, but also help for colitis, things like that. If a parent has concerns about those types of things, what would you say would be the proper way to handle that from a health standpoint in terms of exposure to the other students?
Sure. Well, it's a tough one because it's like the answer to most of these questions, it's really just a risk assessment. And if you sort of step up from 50,000 feet and look at any question regarding is it safe, my response to you is, well, how safe do you want it to be? Do you want it to be really safe, in which case don't go into an indoor environment like this with other people? Do you want it to be somewhat safe? Well, go into an indoor environment, but wear a mask and socially distant. Or do you want it to be not safe at all? Just hold this meeting and let everybody sit next to each other and have no mask. So someone who has a high risk, whether that's someone who's of a certain age, like myself, or has certain underlying medical conditions, obviously they have to take greater steps to protect themselves than others. And so my answer is it's a risk assessment. If you put yourself in an indoor situation with others who you don't know what their COVID status is, then you're increasing your risk. Now, obviously, if you're taking all the measures that we're supposed to be taking, then you diminish your risk, but it's still not zero.
And if we were, let's say, able to test students and staff prior to the start of school, what would you say the time frame, the window would be? Let's just for argument's sake say school starts September 1st. When would you want all the testing, when would you want the testing performed and completed by for an opening of September 1st?
Well, it's a loaded question because the CDC does not recommend routine testing for students. If you did test for students, then the question would be, how often are you going to test from them? Because a single point in time doesn't give you too much information. It gives you where they are that day. It doesn't give you where they were the next day. So if I tested 2 days before school started, that doesn't tell me where they are on the day school started. Mm-hmm. So then you have to figure, if we're going to test people, what's the frequency we're going to test them at? Well, is it going to be once a month, once a week, every day? I would say every day would make the most sense. Test every day, just like you brush your teeth, do a home test, look at the line, the blue line turns positive, don't go to school. Blue line turns negative, go to school. Have the rapid test, have it done immediately. Only one problem, that does not exist. So when that does exist, that might become part of the reality, but right now, I don't think global testing is going to be of much benefit, just because one, it's be very, very cumbersome to do, very expensive to do. Colleges are doing it, and won't give you the answer you're looking for in a real-time way unless it were immediate results, so unless you had rapid testing, because otherwise you're going to wait until tomorrow, or 3 days from now, or right now, 7 days from now, to get a test, at which time it's clinically insignificant. You can't act on that information of where someone was 7 days ago. Now it's time to test them again. So I think that global testing right now is just with the technology that we have is not a real practical matter for public schools. Just my own opinion, and it's the CDC's recommendation as well.
And in terms of the, I guess the part Desi was talking about, perhaps 3 feet, that's sort of the rule of thumb we've all been hearing day to day is the 6 feet distance. Brockton High School, I don't need to tell you, is a very congested school on an average day here at Brockton High. So I assume that the mayor has talked to you a little bit about what we discussed in terms of alternating per schedules for our students. If possible, would you recommend, we abide by the 6-foot rule, if possible, I would assume, or?
So it's a matter of risk. How safe do you want to be? You want to be a little safe? Don't go to school at all,
No
A little
school,
bit more
yeah,
safe.
there you go. Some kids
So-
would love that, no school, all right.
So where did it come from? So the World Health Organization has 1 meter, okay? So that's their sort of going, in other parts of the world, 3 feet or 1 meter is kind of the going distance. In this country, we picked 6 feet. It was, I think it initially was an arbitrary decision based on, I believe, something back in the early 2000s with the other coronavirus infection and how it spread on an airplane, and picked 6 feet. That seems to make a lot of sense. Of course, the virus can be spit out 18 feet in some circumstances, but masks seem to prevent that kind of thing from happening. So 6 feet, I think, would be safer than 3 feet. I'm not sure why that was settled on, other than it's a lot easier, obviously, to deal with a 3 feet situation. And there was a study that kind of looked at, I believe it was an amalgam of a lot of different studies to try and figure out how much of a protection there was between this 3-foot and 6-foot area. And there wasn't a significant amount of clinical spread of disease in the difference between 3 feet and 6 feet. And so I think that they had at least some scientific data that could justify making that recommendation. Now, the CDC doesn't make that recommendation. That's a Mass Department of Public Health that's come up with that.
Mm-hmm. And our statistics in Massachusetts are pretty going in the right direction.
Well, yes, so the statistics in Massachusetts are going in the right direction. That's correct. We had sort of the typical first wave of a pandemic back in March and April. Here in the city of Brockton, in the middle of the worst of it, we had a testing rate of 50% positive. So 50% of all cases done were positive. Now, admittedly, back in those early days, only people with symptoms were being tested. So it wasn't just anybody driving through the high school tent that could go. As of the last week, 2 weeks ago, it was down to below 2%. And the statewide average is about 1.9%. We're about at the state average. Now, the last few days, that number has started to creep up. And so there's a little bit of a concern because the numbers have creeped up. And we go over this every day on my daily call with the mayor. And we pointed this out to the hospitals yesterday, that over the weekend, the number of new cases in Brockton more than doubled. Now, still, going up from 2 to 4 to 8 is, not like when we had 50 cases a day, but still it's concerning. Concerning enough so that the state has actually put a little spotlight on us and made us one of the communities where they're going to increase testing, free testing, and increase the amount of testing that we can do starting next week. So a lot of the concern about opening up schools, I think, in my opinion, has to do with how prevalent is COVID in your community. So in a rural community in Iowa, where there's not much COVID, the rules are going to be different than in a community where it's 2%, that becomes 5%, that becomes 8%. I think in New York, and don't quote me on this, but I believe the green light was 5% and the red light was 10%. So the green light meaning as long as things were under 5%, things could proceed. Once they got to 10%, everything shuts down. Right. So right now we're still way under 5%. But we don't know what it's going to be like next week or next September. And that's the problem, of course. Even if schools do open up on time, you don't know what it's going to be like the week after schools open up. Because believe me, it's just not even possible to comprehend how quickly the science changes on this disease. Last week, the recommendation for doctors was if you have COVID, and you test positive, you're out of commission for 10 days, the last 3 of which you have to be symptom-free, fever-free. All of a sudden, that's now changed. Now you can be out for 10 days, but it's only 24 hours of fever-free off of medicines. So even the clinical conditions, recommendations change day to day, week to week. If you go to the CDC website, they have something called What's New in the CDC, and every day there's 6 or 7 things that get changed.
Well, I guess you mentioned, the community, what is basically going on in your community. And, it's no secret that, Brockton is a community where we've experienced, unfortunately, a higher rate because of, I would guess, the congestion of, our housing market, our housing stock here in the city. And so if that is basically the common sense rule of thumb, to adjust and adapt based on your community standards and your community sort of set of circumstances and situation, then I think your risk assessment, how high, how careful do you want to be, would lean towards being, more conservative in a community where we are higher than, like you said, rural places. Or so if you can get away with 6 feet over 3 feet, then I think do it in light of.
So I'm glad I don't have to make those decisions. I can answer your questions and let you make those decisions, but I agree with you that Brockton is, I don't want to say unique, but it's certainly characterized by many, many factors of this disease that don't make it good for us. The disease spreads with congestion, in ethnic communities, and people of color, in poor communities, and so in Massachusetts, we're up there with Chelsea and Lawrence, city of Boston, in terms of the number of cases that we've actually had, and so I think that it does matter when in the decision making.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to give the numbers, and what Dr. Herman said is true. We were notified today, the city was notified this afternoon by DPH, that again, because the trend is starting, we were 59 cases just the other day. Today we were 84 cases, so we're seeing an uptick. We did lose some additional people, 268 deaths, 268 loss of life. And then as of this morning, total cases overall, 4,312. So again, what the doctor has been saying, every morning we have a call at 10:45, and then he's on all the hospital calls with me, nursing home calls, a pastor's call. We have a bunch of pastors every week. It's all data driven. So again, thank you. I know Vice Chairman had a question, Mr. D'Agostino.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us tonight and for all the help you've given the city thus far. We really appreciate it. So I wanted to, as you know, we're charged with figuring out, do we open, how do we open, and what all that looks like. And I wanted to get your feedback on a couple of things. One suggestion and discussion I had with some folks was a staggered start. You have kindergarten go back, then you add first grade, and then maybe at the middle school, 6 goes back, a week later 7 goes back, similar at the high school here. Do you see any value in doing something like that, a slow, staggered reopening of whatever, if there's any in person, if we go in a hybrid model where there's, only smaller numbers, but do you think there's any value in staggering the?
I don't know, and we don't know. So I have here a summary of 15 different countries and what they've done, because it's already happened. It's happened in Denmark and Israel and Sweden and basically all the European countries and Far Eastern countries, and they've used different models. Staggered starts, smaller classrooms, 10 to 15, cohorts of kids, masks, no masks, social distancing, no social distancing. And after looking at all of the different data, the CDC says we can't tell.
Right.
We don't know. There's no good data. We haven't done the experiment yet in the United States of America. What I can tell you, though, is that I do have some experience in emergency preparedness. And as I was telling Mayor Sullivan, I remember coming through this high school in 2009 when we were doing pandemic planning for the flu then, and we were going to take over the cafeteria to make that the alternative care site. We were looking for alternative care sites in case the hospitals got overwhelmed. The skating rink was going to be the morgue. We were going to bring in Ryder refrigerated trucks if we needed to. It was serious and scary back then. But in the pandemic planning, you always have to anticipate what the worst case scenario is going to be.
Okay. And then, again, depending on who you're listening to, it doesn't affect kids under 10. It does affect kids, little kids. Does the CDC, have they put out any thoughts on that or science on that?
So, not specifically, but I can tell you just my own reading of the science that's out there right now seems pretty clear that the littler kids are not affected as badly. They certainly don't get as sick. They certainly don't get hospitalized and die, with the exceptions of the very rare inflammatory syndrome like Kawasaki disease that you see handfuls of here and there. But for the most part, they don't. In Massachusetts, I think 0 deaths under the age of 19 so far, and only 2 under the age of 30, or at least not 2 per 100,000, under the age of 30. So this is not a serious illness of young people, but it's not so much the kids that are the concern, it's the community.
Right.
It's the staff, it's the teachers, it's the parents and the grandparents, it's everyone who they can pass it along to, because I think there is very clear evidence that they still can spread the disease, maybe not as efficiently as adults. I know there's just, and every day it's a new study, so today it's whatever, South Korea maybe, where the younger kids under 10 are not so good at spreading it, but if you're between the ages of 10 and 19, you do as good a job as an adult of spreading the disease. So little kids, not so big spreaders, and there are a lot of countries, as I've read through the various international experiments that are going on. A lot of countries tend towards opening up their schools for the little kids, but not so much for the big kids.
Right. And you mentioned teachers, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the other issue is maybe the kids aren't as affected, but the teachers are adults. So you talked about some of these other countries that have opened up in different ways. Do we have any information on teacher infection rates during those, classes, even with the smaller sizes and such?
Yes, and once again, it is entirely inconsistent. Some studies, like in Israel, large quantities of teachers and pockets of students get infected. Other countries, students get infected, but not the teachers. So it's all across the board. I can tell you, though, that right now I can understand how. I remember what it was back when I had to go into my first shift in the ER in March, and I was scared. I didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what kind of PPE we were going to wear, how quickly this thing spread, and it's scary to think about having to take care of somebody with an illness that can cause you harm. And when I think about teachers and school nurses, especially school nurses, right now, I think they haven't done that yet. They haven't taken care of anyone with COVID. They went away in March, and now they're coming back and have to learn how to do it. And so I think I can understand how there's a lot of anxiety about that.
Okay. All right. And I think, just my final question, and again, you may not be able to help much with this either, because I know, so other states have had these big spikes, Florida, Texas, there's others that have just exploded again. And again, depending on who you're listening to, there's different reasons given. Do you have anything that you are aware of as to what is going on in these states? What are they not doing, or what are they doing that they ought not to be doing, so that we can learn from their mistakes?
Yeah. Well, I did see, it's not every state, but I did see a pretty good synopsis of all 50 states and the intensity of measures that were enacted. And it's hard to put a number on it, mask wearing in the state versus a whole lot of communities in the, not in the statewide, but a lot of communities enforcing mask wearing and social distancing and where they enforce mask wearing, and are houses of worship closed down or not. But it seems pretty clear that there tends to be a much better response to this virus in states where there is more intensity to interventions to try and slow things down. So we did things really well in Massachusetts eventually in terms of closing down. Now we're opening up, and it doesn't surprise me that the numbers are starting to creep up. This is a virus that is out there. Okay, so it's out there. There's no cure. There is no treatment, there's no vaccine, so it's just gonna be out there.
Right.
And usually if it's us versus the pandemic, usually the pandemic wins, unless we're really, really careful. And so, it's really gonna be right now, until we get the next best thing, which will probably be monoclonal antibody treatment, until the next best thing comes along, we've gotta do this. And sit apart like you're all doing. But that means everyone has got to do it. It means, when you're out in the park, or on the beach or in the grocery store or, in your day-to-day life, you have to do it. And the bad stuff that will happen is if we don't do it, until the next best thing comes along.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Is there any other members of the committee? Mr. Sullivan and then the superintendent, please. Tim?
Yes, thank you for coming, Dr. Herman. Nice to meet you. My question is, I'm not sure if it's the governor or somebody in the State House has come out and said masks should be worn grades 2 to 12. I just wanted your opinion on whether, if we should at least try to have the kids in kindergarten and first grade wear masks, like the other kids.
So I'll plead I don't know on that one. I do, but it has an asterisk. So if you go to the bottom of the page at the asterisk, there is some studies in other countries where they do ask little kids to wear masks. And to a certain extent they do it, but it's not as effective just because they're not going to be as compliant with wearing the masks. So I'll stick with the I don't know answer, but obviously the more protection, the more mask wearing, social distancing, smaller class sizes, contact tracing, ability to follow up on kids that are positive. And believe me, they're going to be positive kids. It's, when you open up a school, it's going to spread. There will be, so the big concern is going to be, do you have an effective contact tracing program so that you can kind of nip things in the bud and don't have to close a whole school down, but maybe just a cohort, a classroom or that kind of thing.
Just one more final question. I had heard that this virus, somebody could have it and not have any symptoms at all. No fever, no cough, no running, nothing. But they're carrying the virus. Is that possible?
Yeah, that's why when I read that DESE document that said that it can be really serious or just like a bad cold. Well, that's accurate. It can be just like a bad cold, but it can also be just like a mild cold, and it can also be just like no cold. Absolutely, you can be asymptomatic. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me when the dust settles and we're having the school committee meeting 2 years from now and reading the book on COVID that we learned that more than 50% of the people were asymptomatic in spreading this disease. That would not surprise me. And of course, that's why it's so difficult. And the other reason it's difficult is not just asymptomatic, it's pre-symptomatic. So you can, the time that you're really most contagious is the day before you develop your cough and your shortness of breath and your fever and your symptoms.
Thank you.
Mr. Superintendent, please.
Doctor, as you know, the Department of Ed has required us to put a plan in place for in-person to try to get as many kids back in school as possible, using 3 feet of social distancing. So, number one is I just want to ask your opinion on that. And that's, we have to submit a plan. That does not mean that this is what we're going to go with, number one. Number two is the document you're referring to is the protocols for responding to COVID-19 scenarios in school. And it's interesting to note that if somebody does, a staff member, a student does test positive in a school, then they want everybody that was within 6 feet of that person to quarantine, which kind of is tough when you're requiring us to come back to school at 3 feet, and then, you know, everybody in that classroom is going to be within 6 feet of that person because that's the guidelines. It's just your opinion on that, because it kind of seems a little bit odd that, you know, they're requiring, you know, they're asking us to come back at 3 feet, but then everything they refer to in the documents about testing everybody goes to 6 feet.
So my opinion is that the document gets an A for organization, but I'm going to give it an incomplete and say it's not quite ready for prime time. Could you go back and rework it, please, and submit it to me at the end of the week? So this document has a lot of errors in it that need to be fixed. Some of it is just that the CDC guidance changed, I'm sure, from when it was written until when it was published. But one glaring error is that they talk about exposure to somebody with COVID-19 and then ask you to get tested after 4 or 5 or 6 days. And of course, that doesn't matter. Once you've been exposed, and you're out for 14 days. There is no get out of jail free card. A negative test does not get you get you back to school, because you can turn positive 2 days after exposure or 14 days after exposure. Now, admittedly, 98% will turn positive within 12 days, but still, the CDC recommendation is up to 14 days. So you're quarantined for 14 days. You can test every day, day 14, and when you test negative again on day 14, you're still coming back. There's no, there's no way to come back any sooner. So that has to be fixed. And then some other, areas of concern are, if a kid during school finds out that he tests positive, the current guidelines is we'll have him sit there in the classroom with a mask on. There are those who would not be comfortable with that particular recommendation, or those that have symptoms on the bus, bring them into the building and sit them in the school nurse's waiting room. There are those that might not be comfortable with the concept of bringing someone into a building or putting them into a room with other people. And somebody might want to consider a separate closed-off area where someone only dressed in appropriate PPE would be caring for them until they could go home. But there are just some of the concerns I have about that document. I'm sure I'm not the only one, and I'm sure this will be vetted again, and those bugs will be worked out, and they'll get a good grade at the end of the week.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from any members? I want to thank Dr. Herman. What you see is what you get. That's why I hired him. He's unbelievable. And he has done presentations before the city council, Zoom. This is the first one publicly, in person, and he's not going anywhere, so we can continue this, right? He'll come back to the school committee as much as you guys want him. And he's been working diligently with myself and Mike. So thank you very much, Dr. Herman. I know you have another event, but truly appreciate your time tonight.
Anytime. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening. Kim, I'm sorry we bounced you. No disrespect, believe me. No. Kim Gibson, President of the Brockton Education Association, BEA. Good evening, Kim.
Good evening, and don't mind me, I saw the good doctor do it, I'm going to do it as well. So good evening, Mayor Sullivan, Superintendent Thomas, and members of the school committee. I want to take the opportunity to thank you all for all of your work that you've done now that we're back in person. Over the last 4 months, it's been very difficult for everyone. A lot of stress has built up amongst teachers, amongst all different staff. But I do want to thank all the hours you've put in, even up until now, trying to figure out how do we safely reopen our schools. I sit with Cynthia. Cynthia's on our communications group. We have some very thoughtful conversations. I want to thank all of the teachers who are watching this, all the paras, the administrative assistants, the custodians, the cafeteria workers, all the non-union members, for all the work they're doing as well for the reopening plan. I want to say that it has been a lot of thoughtful conversations, a lot of difficult conversations. What Dr. Herman just said is resonating with me, and I sit here saying, how do we open safely? I don't agree with the density requirements for 3 feet. I think they need to be 6 feet. I hear from my members on a daily basis about that. I know that you are going to struggle with this conversation over the next couple of weeks and make some decisions, but I really know that you're going to be thoughtful. I want to share with Mayor Sullivan and Superintendent Thomas the number of teachers who have reached out to me personally, thanking you both for all of your leadership and including the BEA in the conversations, because it wasn't always like that in the past. I always had great relationships with superintendents, but you welcomed me into the mayor's office, which has never happened. So I think that's a huge change for our school committee. I think it's a wonderful thing to happen for the school department. And I do want to, again, thank you all for all that you're doing and continue to listen to your heart, because this is not an easy decision. Things come down to science and really what is right to do for children and the staff. So thank you all.
Thank you very much, Kim, and thank you for your leadership as president of the union. Truly appreciate it. There was nobody else that signed up, so we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which actually is the consent agenda. And I'm going to ask if there's any school committee members that want to take any out of order or individually. Again, it's A through J. Is there, Mr. Sullivan, please?
Yes, I'd like to take out item D and H.
D and H, and that's in the form of a motion, correct?
Yes, I'd like
Is
to
there a
make a
second on the motion, please? Second. Second made by Mr. D'Agostino. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. We will take D and H out. Is there any other school committee members who want to take? Mr. D'Agostino, please.
Items B, E, F, and G.
Oh, geez, what is it? B?
B, E, F, and G.
All right. That's the form of a motion, correct?
Yes.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. We're going to take B, F, what was it? B, F, E, and G.
Why don't we just take the ones we're going to approve?
That's why you're the superintendent and I'm not.
Might be easy
No?
just to pick the one out that.
All right, so it appears that A,
Items, I make a motion to approve items A, C, I, and J.
Second.
there's a motion on the floor, is properly seconded, A, C, I, and J. All in favor?
Help, Mr. Mayor, just trying to help.
You're the best. That's why you're my school committee from Ward 1. All opposed? Carries. So just for minutes of the records, approval of the minutes, June 16, 2020, regular school committee, that's A. C is approval of minutes, June, wait a second. You ever get fogged up when you have glasses on and a mask? It's terrible, terrible. June 10, 2020, special school committee meeting is C. I will be the approval of the 2020-2021 school committee meeting dates. And then lastly, J is acceptance of notification of personnel actions, leaves of absences, resignations, and retirements. So for the record, they've passed A, C, I, and J. We will now take D and H.
Yes. As chair of the Transportation Safety and Security Subcommittee meeting, the committee voted to accept $1.4 million shot for fiscal year 2020-2021 for the bus transportation. The 55 large buses were cut to 37, and the 55 vans are to remain the same. That was brought up also at the city council meeting. And I just wanted to mention that the subcommittee voted unanimous in favor of that.
Any
And I-
questions for Mr. Sullivan on that? Go on to H now, Mr. Sullivan.
I'd like to make a motion that item D be accepted as written.
Motion on the floor is a second? Second. Second by Mr. D'Agostino. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries. And we'll read into the record again. D is approval of minutes, June 9, 2020, Security, Safety, Transportation Subcommittee meeting. That hereby passes. We'll go on to H, please, Mr. Sullivan.
There was just one opposed on that one. I opposed that one.
Okay, for the record, Mr. Minicello opposed.
Item 2 was the bid review subcommittee meeting, which happened Thursday, July 16th, in the Nissel Room down at Central. 2 bids came before the committee. One was for waste disposal, and we went with the low bidder, which was Allied Waste, for $1.1 million. Item 2 was an emergency lease of general warehouse space, which at the time was the only vote. There was the second bid put in, but it was out of Brockton, and it was going to be 18 miles round trip to get there and back. So it was voted unanimously for that bid to go to Churchill Linen in Brockton for $7 a square foot. And I'd like to make a motion that the bid review, item H, be accepted as read.
So motion made, is there a second? Mrs. Sullivan, any questions on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed, motion carries. It passes. Approval of the minutes, July 16, 2020, bid review subcommittee meeting. Last agenda items are B, E, F, and G. Mr. D'Agostino, please.
Okay, and I know there's quite a few there because we've had several meetings, and so I want to assure everybody that I have gone through, tried to pull out and be very concise, because there are several reports to go over, so hopefully I've made this as concise as possible. When I looked at how many meetings there were to report on, I was like, wow, that could take a long time. So, item B is the June 16th Finance Subcommittee meeting. We started the meeting, I gave, and the mayor joined me in giving an overview of the budget process for anybody who was watching, so they would kind of understand how that works and why we were taking the actions we were taking at the time we were taking them. Then under agenda item number 1, the FY 2020 budget, Mr. Petronio discussed final preparations for the FY 2020 budget. Under agenda item number 2, Mr. Petronio mentioned our budget proposal had been submitted to the city council, and so that was pending their review and approval at that time. There was some question and answers from members of the committee under item 2. We moved on to item 3, Chartwell's contract renewal extension, and we did grant that extension. It was looking at a 2% increase in costs and looking at 1.9 million in excess funds, which would go back into things like equipment upgrades and improvements in the food service areas in our schools. Agenda item number 4, new business. And let me see. We had just mentioned there that Chartwells would double up on meals on Wednesday and Thursdays to make sure that families had the meals they needed for over the long weekend. Meeting was adjourned. Okay, now item E, June 9th Finance Subcommittee meeting. And this is, nope, forgive me. Okay, June 9th Finance Subcommittee meeting. Agenda item number 1. Finance Subcommittee allocated the amount of $165,927,020. We had started originally from a 5% cut, and were able to get that part of the budget to only be a 2% cut, with a lot of work from all of us collectively, and certainly the CFOs of the schools and the city. Let's see. There was some question and answers, comments by the mayor, as well as Mr. Clarkson and Mr. Petronio to the committee. Then we did vote to do a reduction in force, 24 certified staff, 15 paraprofessionals, 6 MTAs, 4 administrations through retirement, or reduction in force, and 7 non-certified. Let's see, further, there was a motion to approve the net school spending amount of $165,927,020. Then motion to approve non-net of $11,553,365. Under new business, there was no new business, meeting was adjourned. All right, and then item E. Version number. Okay, this is the June 4th Finance Subcommittee meeting. Agenda item 1, wow. FY 2020 budget. And again, we just had a discussion with with several questions and answers regarding the budget. We talked a bit about the busing situation and, you know, where we would end up with them. Let's see. And, you know, what that contract looks like and obligates us to do. We talked about Chartwell's grab and go for the summer. Agenda item number 2, under new business. We had a discussion about planning a retreat to discuss several topics, including, you know, rooting out racial injustice as a district, as well as at the retreat, our opening or reopening discussions and plans as well. There was a lengthy discussion on this topic that occurred as well, and then the meeting was adjourned. Okay. I think we're almost there. This is number 7. This is Policy Subcommittee, June 30th. Okay, agenda item number 1 was the student and parent handbooks. Ms. Wolder gave us a report about the handbooks, that they were a little late because they were trying to work on COVID-19 issues, but at this point, they needed to get them to be printed in order to have them in time. And so we discussed that we would just make an addendum once we were ready with our final rules regarding COVID-19 and just put out an addendum to the handbooks. And the addendum to the handbooks, or possible amendments to the handbooks, was item number 2. And item number 3 was so-called PPE for reopening. Item number 4 was a revision to policy JFA, which was a caregiver authorization, and it was decided to remove that policy from our policy manual. Okay, and I think I have... Do I have one more item? Did I do June 4th finance?
Yep.
Number 6. I covered that? Okay. All right, then that is all I have. Again, see, I promised to make it as abridged as I could.
You did well, you did well. B, E, F, G is in the form of a motion from the Vice Chair, Mr. D'Agostino. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sullivan. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. And again, just a minutes to reflect approval of the minutes, June 16, 2020, Finance Subcommittee meeting, which is B, approval of the minutes, June 9, 2020, Finance Subcommittee. E, F, approval of minutes, June 4, 2020, Finance Subcommittee. And G, approval of the minutes, June 30th, 2020, Policy Subcommittee meeting. Consent agenda, which is item number 3, is concluded. We'll go on to 4, communications, and I don't believe there are any communications before us. We will now go on to agenda 5, which is the report of the Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Thomas. Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we spoke at our last meeting, at our retreat, actually, as you know, by July 31st, we have to submit 3 plans to the Department of Education. One with a full person return, using 3 feet of social distancing, and I think we all pretty much were on the same page that is very difficult and does not look like that will happen here in Brockton. Obviously, we still have to talk about it, but we do have to submit the plan. And when we do submit that plan, we will be very clear that even if that was something we wanted to go with, we don't have the staff currently or the budget to go with that plan. We're down 64 positions. And even if we were able to get all students into school and space them at 3 feet apart, we do not have enough staff to put in front of those classrooms. So obviously that will be a decision this committee will make formally soon, but that, as we all spoke, even though we do have to submit the plan, that is not something we're considering at this time. Obviously, there'll be more discussion about it, but that's something that we discussed at the retreat. The hybrid model, we put out a survey today asking parents what kind of a hybrid model they would be interested in. Jess, could you go over the 3 questions that were asked? And the hybrid model is basically some students in school, some students out of school learning remotely. And then that's a hybrid model. And then obviously there's a full remote plan if everybody was to stay home. And that's something, again, that we have to submit to the Department of Education. What I really want to make clear to parents is they will have a choice. If, no matter what we vote on coming back to school, if a parent does not feel safe sending their child to school, then they will be given a full remote education through the Brockton Public Schools. These are our students. We want to keep them as our students, but that obviously, and that's been a lot of questions parents have been emailing and asking us that, if I don't agree to send, even if you go with a hybrid model, I really still don't want my child coming back to school. And we went over that at the retreat. At the time of the retreat, there was close to 30% of the parents that were saying that they wanted their child at home with a full remote plan. That will be an option. Obviously, it's our obligation to educate every child that's part of the Brockton Public Schools, and they would have an option if they do not feel comfortable. If we are to come back with a hybrid model, they would be able to keep their child home, and we would be educating them remotely. And that's all the plans we've been working on since back in May. We've had 80 people on a reopening committee working on all these plans, and as this committee always does, along with the mayor, the best interest of the safety of students and staff is always number one. So, Jess, could you just go over the 3 questions? And again, we're asking these questions not meaning that, we've made a decision on any one plan, but we wanted to get parents' feedback of what kind of a hybrid model that they would be interested in. So I'll let Jess go over the 3, and I think that was sent out today?
It was sent out
Okay.
at 2 o'clock today.
Thank you.
We already have close to 3,000 responses. So we did a phone survey, and then also we texted out a Microsoft form for those who prefer to do it via text. And the simple question was, which of the following schedules would you prefer in a hybrid learning format? Option 1 was your child would be in, thank you. Option, this is on. So the question was, which of the following schedules would you prefer in a hybrid learning format? Option 1 would be your child would be in school every day with a schedule that rotated each week. For example, he or she would be in school on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 1 week, and Tuesday and Thursday the following week. Option 2, your child would be in school for the same 2 days each week, as well as 1 additional day every other week. For example, he or she would be in school on Tuesday and Thursday every week, and also in school every other Monday. Option 3, your child would be in school for the same 2 days and have a third half day every other week. For example, he or she would be in school on Tuesday and Thursday every week, and also be in school every other Monday for a half a day. And so right now, it's still early, but it looks like there's a strong preference for option 1, which is that rotating schedule of Monday, Wednesday, Friday 1 week, and Tuesday, Thursday the following week. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. So I'll open up to any questions they have
Any-
about a
any
hybrid.
questions? Any questions at all from the superintendent? We'll move on to the next item then.
So again, the full remote plan, and that's obviously will be put in place for those parents who choose to keep their children home throughout this pandemic. And also will be in place, obviously, if, as we know, things are changing daily. And, there is a chance that we get to the middle of August and the state says everybody needs to start remotely. Or that is a decision that the school committee will think about as we go through. And that's everybody being remote. And obviously, we're planning for that. And there'll be professional development around that, a lot of it. We are planning, Aldo is working hard with Troy Clarkson and the city side to make sure we're getting the county to pay for as many laptops as possible so we can get to be a 1-to-1 district. So every child, not just one per family, has a laptop. We have to work closely with the state, which we're doing. We did submit a grant. Ethan and a team of people, June, worked on a grant with the Department of Ed. There's a $25 million grant around technology, and that's about laptops. It's about internet access. We really need help from the state to make sure that families who do not have internet access have that access. Because even if we go with a hybrid model and those students that whatever day, when they're home, they need to have the internet access, and they also need to have the laptop as well. So, and that's obviously a big part of that's what remote learning is. So that's important that, we get into September and we start school, that every student has their own laptop. not just one per family, and also the internet access needed. So, so basically, we're finalizing those plans, and at the end of the meeting, when we refer items to subcommittees, I'll be making some recommendations for meetings between now and July 31st, before those plans are due. And then I'll be asking for another meeting, so we can, as this committee can vote on how will it return to school at this time. I mean, you know, the state is asking us to have something in place to them by August 10th. But I think the committee made it clear during the retreat that we want to make a decision before that, so families have more time to plan. And I agree with that, but whenever we make that decision and that date we vote on that, it's always got to be, you know, we'd have to put something in motion subject to change as guidelines change. As we get closer into August, obviously things could change and they could say, you know what, everybody's remote. Because, you know, as you know, what has happened in other states. So I think no matter what we vote on and we give parents plenty of time, it's always going to be subject to change before we get to September 1st. So that's pretty much it under the plans. And again, we'll go into those in much more detail, and I'll recommend that at the subcommittee when we get to items to refer to subcommittee.
Any questions for the superintendent relative to that? Joyce, please. Ms. Azak.
Thank you. Thank you, Jess, for that information. Actually, I was looking at the text message that came through. So we do have a lot of people that really do not reply to the text messages. Did this go out, obviously, in multiple
So it went out-
languages?
Yep, and it went out with a phone call as well, so they could just press dial 1, 2, or 3 to choose a preferred option.
Okay. If we can,
We do both, just to make sure everybody gets it.
I mean, 3,000 is pretty impressive.
Oh,
It's
for only 2 o'clock this afternoon, yeah.
It's only 7 o'clock now, so that's pretty impressive. If we can just get maybe like an update in a few days, probably
Sure.
by Monday. And
Well, we'll have
then-
something in the packet for you. We'll have updated, in Friday's packet, we'll have the updated results. And then Jess always sends another reminder text to families as well. But we'll put whatever we have so far up to date, as of like Friday at noontime, we'll put in the packet for you.
My other question is I know we're asking the parents, but, you know, how about the students that are, our students are very vocal, and they want to tell us what they want. So I'd really like to hear what they want. You know, this is, they're attending the classes. I'm not going to be in school. So I'd be curious to see how a lot of our students feel. I know a lot of the older students have been very vocal. So.
Hey, Jess, can that go out to them in an email? Can they respond so we'll do it. Because
Or if they have
obviously,
infinite, can we do something, can they log in to, like a
it will do
questionnaire?
it,
Infinite?
they all have an email address,
Okay.
so the best way for them
I'm
to
just
respond would
curious.
be through email.
High school, they're good about checking their email. I don't know if
Yeah.
they're checking it now, but during the school year, they're very good about that.
I mean, this affects them 100%. And I think, you know, letting their voice be heard as well.
A lot of them get the text messages too as well.
It's to their parents' phones.
Yep.
If we
Some of
send
them,
it
I
to
think.
their parents and ask if instead of a student survey, they definitely.
Well, we'll definitely do an email to them all, because they all have email addresses, and
Yeah,
that's
just-
K to 12.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough decision. I already know what I would look at for, you know, going back to school, but I'm just curious to see how a lot of our students feel, because I am hearing a lot of mixed information, and a lot of them are just, I mean, you have the ones that really don't want to go back, they're enjoying this, and then you have the ones that they're excelling as far as, you know, classes, they're strong students, and they're concerned, especially at high school. It's really hard. You know, again, I keep repeating myself, but we're all sitting here with masks, but a lot of people I'm seeing on my social media are cookouts, parties, dinners, events, no masks, no nothing. So it's really difficult to try to control something when we don't know what they're doing at home that's going to affect other people in school, our teachers, our staff, and other students. So, but I definitely would be curious.
We can actually email the form to them, that's how they would complete it, by the form,
Yep, so
okay?
we just do a Microsoft form. And actually, the social emotional learning group and the reopening team is already doing something for students. I'm wondering if we can just incorporate anything we missed to that survey. So
Something, maybe some kind of a reminder, if we can post it like on social media, like just make sure, you know, you want your voice heard. This is your opportunity. Let us know what you want, what you're comfortable with, whether it's the parents or the students. this is a really big decision that we need to make in the next couple of weeks, so this is their opportunity to let us know. But thanks. Thank you.
Cynthia, please.
I had a question about the hybrid model. So if we go with the hybrid model, would we be able to do the 6?
Like a troublemaker.
That was like trying to find the fire alarm in your house that's beeping. So, Cynthia, yes, if we would be able to go to 6 feet if we did hybrid, where half the students would be in school and half the students would be out of school, we would be able to do the 6 feet, and obviously we would. And actually, and would also be able to give teachers at the front of the room more space as well, if we went to the 6 feet. Because Dr. Cobbs and his team and facilities have been cleaning out classrooms and getting rid of clutter, and we know that as you know, the kidney-shaped tables and the horseshoe tables where students usually meet together have been taken out, because obviously you wouldn't be able to do that. So we have been able to open up a lot of room in classes. And again, we had to do this feasibility study and show the state what 3 feet looks like. But if you now go to 6 feet, we would have plenty of space to go with a 6 feet of social distance, and also give plenty of room in the front of the classroom for the teacher.
Mr. D'Agostino, please.
I was just wondering, and maybe this is a question for the doctor, but, you go into some places and, they also get shields. And I don't know that it would be realistic for us to get shields for every student, but what about staff members? Again, if the kids are all supposed to be facing in the same direction, that's 10 or 14 people facing that one teacher. Just a thought. I know, obviously we want everybody to be safe, but
Those have been ordered under the county. Yep, 3,000 shields that teachers would have the option. Yep, so. Are we good? All right, I think I got too close to the mic. It must be the mask. Yeah, so basically Aldo we'll do a report on this when we get to, really deep into our plan, but the 70,000 masks, cloth masks that have been ordered, which is 3 per student to be given, 3 per staff member, those are on their way. They've been shipped. There's also 500,000 paper masks that were bought, I believe. The blue ones, like some of you were wearing, those, I think there was about 500,000 of those ordered under the COVID. And those, obviously, if somebody forgets their mask, those are available for students and staff. So, and then the 3,000 face shields and thousands of bottles of hand sanitizer. There's also the hand sanitizer dispensers that are being installed in every classroom, and also in all the common areas, and also there'll be plenty of backup bottles as well. And then wipes have been ordered, thousands and thousands of wipes. The electrostatic disinfectant guns, about 250 of those ordered, so every school has enough to disinfect, not only between classes, but obviously at night, on the weekends. So we'll have a full report for you of all the other items that have been ordered for. And then, thousands of desks to be ordered to help with the distancing in classrooms and get rid of the bulky tables. Those are starting to come in as well. So thanks to Aldo, Troy, Jim, and the facilities department for their hard work of jumping on, getting this stuff ordered. I mean, thanks to the mayor, he got us in touch with the Plymouth County Commissioners right away. They've been very helpful to us. And we've been able to order this PPE equipment, so, because you knew it was going to start running out. And that includes the plexiglass barriers that we're buying for the main office counters, what we had to buy for Central, we had to buy for the Parent Information Center, and the ones we had to buy for the schools. The way it looks right now, unless Jim and Aldo, we're in really good shape about this stuff coming in. It doesn't, some schools I'm hearing horror stories from superintendents that
they're just now ordering stuff, and now, obviously, the supplies are running out, and they might not have what they need by September, but I'm very confident that we will have what we need for September 1st.
Any additional questions relative to this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on.
Quickly, it was a little bit of a surprise today that the MIA announced that they have postponed fall sports, and they're going to try to start up on September 14th, which was a little bit surprising because yesterday Stonehill reported that they've canceled fall sports. Bridgewater State has announced that they have canceled fall sports. I did ask Kevin Cairo about 2 months ago, along with Dr. Murray, asked them if they would consider, and I don't think they considered this, was to just move all fall sports to the spring, and then we would figure out how we could work fields and have baseball and football, and then, you know, just so they're assured to have a season, just move the fall sports to the spring, and, you know, then winter would have to wait to see what's happening. They said in their announcement that doesn't mean they're going to have fall sports, but they think if they have more time. But usually, as you know, fall sports usually starts around August 17th, August 20th. That's delayed until September 14th, and then we'll have to see what their announcement is. But that's what came out about the extracurricular activities at this time. We still do not have any guidance around band or chorus, which is supposed to come out from the Department of Education. That has not come out yet. And all the other extracurricular sports, activities that we run. And then quickly over transportation, even though guidance has not come out around transportation, so I had Peggy Kalea work on our current buses that we have are 37. I had her work with using 25 on a bus, which is my best guess, is what we'll be able to go with on each bus. So if you use 25 on a bus, you use last year's walking distance, so basically the same bus stops as last year's, the same walkout as last year. And if you went a hybrid model with half the students on one day, half the next, you could get all students bused using, if the same amount of kids decided to take a bus last year, 7,249 students were eligible for a bus. If you did half of those students, if you came to school on half the students one day, half the other, we would be able to bus them all using the same walkouts with the 37 buses, using 25 per bus. The only issue is, if New Heights does not follow our plan, that would cost us, and they stayed with a full in-person plan, and we had to provide them with the exact bus, and we provided them last year, that would cost us 8 more buses. So that would be, we would need then 45 buses if that's the case. Melinda is scheduling a meeting with myself, the leadership of New Heights, the leadership of Cardinal Spellman, and also the leadership of Trinity, so I can go over what our 3 plans look like. They have to submit their own plans, but I would let them know that what we're planning, what our district is planning on doing, and what the direction we're looking to go in, just so they know what we're planning on. But again, they can, and I've talked to the Department of Ed about this, they can go with their own model, and we do have to, no matter what model we're going with, we still have to provide them with the bus service. So that would be the only issue we would have, is that we could do it with the 37, using 25 if half kids went one day, half of the kids went the next. But the issue is, if New Heights stays with their full in-school, if they go fully in-school, that would cost us 8 buses. So we would need 45 buses. Right now, we're funded for 37.
Right.
When's that meeting going to be, Superintendent?
Melinda's setting it up for a day next week. I don't think you've scheduled it yet.
No, next Thursday? I'm trying to think about next
Yep.
Thursday.
Any other questions? Mr. D'Agostino, please.
Mr. Petronio, each bus is roughly 84,000?
Correct.
So did I do my really sketchy math right? If New Heights, or if they were to do that, that would cost us somewhere in the order of about $660 some odd thousand.
84 times 6 or 8, whatever buses, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Just wanted to make sure I had the numbers in my head correctly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions on that matter? Oh, Mr. Sullivan, please. Oh, okay.
It was on the mass I should have asked it when you was on the mess, but, Mr. Superintendent, I'm wondering what you thought about wearing masks in kindergarten, first grade?
The Department of Education, even though they said it's not required, they recommend that we try to get those students to wear masks. So, that would be something that we would try to do and work with students to, but it's not a requirement of the Department of Ed, but it says there, you should be suggested that we try to get them to wear masks. But because of their age, it's not something that's easy to do, but I think, kindergarten and first grade teachers are very, very skillful, and they work great with kids, so I'm sure that there would be, activities and things that they would do to actually encourage students to wear masks. But again, that's something that is not required, but it's suggested that we try to do.
Would it be better if we had a motion to do that, or?
I don't know if we can take a motion to require it.
In other words, just that they at least try to keep the teachers safe?
Oh, yeah, no, I think we can, I think we should wait until our next meeting till I can look into it more. But I wouldn't have, again, whatever we can put in more to make, teachers and staff and students safe, that's something that we would definitely,
Are these expensive, these paper?
those are, what are they, about 50 cents a piece?
47 cents? Yeah.
47. This, we have,
47, I think.
again, we ordered a ton. And we did order plenty, even for K and 1 students. We have ordered 3 cloth masks for every student and every teacher, for us to give them. And then obviously the paper masks as if they forget them. So again, I wouldn't have any problem for us trying to encourage K and 1 students to wear them, but again, that's something that is gonna have to be through, the teachers' work and how skillful they are with those young kids. I think, obviously it's something that, and then the preschool too. I mean, I'm sure, place like the Barrett Russell, they would work with those kids as well, so.
Mr. Sullivan, MEMA was holding 100,000 of these in advance, and we found out about it, and BEMA, Steve Hook, and my office reached out, we got those 100,000 extra masks, so we're stockpiling, Mike and I and all the one Troy, we said it from day one, we want to have more than needed, quite honestly, because then, once we get through COVID, then there's flu season and whatever the hell else is going to be there, so we won't be short on giving supplies to students and teachers and personnel.
And just so you know, it wasn't just me. I had an email from 2 teachers that were worried. They were first grade teachers, and they were worried that something could be spread to them. That's why I brought it up.
Oh, no, I think it's a legitimate thing. I mean, I just know my 3rd grade is gonna take it off, I know that.
Yeah, they probably all will.
Yeah, but I think we have to,
At least try.
yes,
I think
absolutely.
we encourage it at every grade.
Okay.
Yep.
Actually,
Days please.
if we, with the younger students, they don't have a lanyard, so,
They don't have.
No,
I
but
don't hear IDs other than.
no, so I did see something that was pretty nifty for the younger students, is if they had a lanyard, they clip the mask onto the lanyard, just easier than losing them all the time, so if we can maybe get them some lanyards, that might help.
When she and I worked together at Brockton, we found the cheapest price with the best lanyards possible.
Absolutely.
I
I mean-
breakaway ones, they're safe.
Yeah, or something like, just something that clips on, just to help them as they're not used to wearing something, if they end up having to wear masks, just to help them out. Everyone's getting so creative online, and that was one that I saw, our teacher actually posted it, where they just clipped their mask right to the lanyard, and they weren't losing it all day long.
That's a good point. Yeah, we'll look into those. Linda has added plenty of these over the years.
I think we should look into, you look at this, right, the kid's gonna think it's a doctor, right? So if we can get some that have smiley faces or cartoons or whatever, we should look at that as well. Yep.
More interesting than a basic cloth mask.
I think the cloth mat we did with the logo. Yeah, we did a nice logo on it, so they're just not plain. And then obviously, when we get back in school, I'm sure they'll get creative with ordering, ones that are specific to their school. The quickest ones we could get, we had to go with one logo, so we could get them, make sure they're here in time. But as we get into school, I'm sure each teacher in elementary school will be very creative with masks that they can order to make it, more kid-friendly.
The There is a drop dead date to get reimbursement from the county, though. There's 2 phases. The 3rd phase is only for veteran services, council on aging, senior centers, and libraries. So if we don't purchase it and put it in second round, it's on us. And then if they don't expend the money by December 30th, it goes back to the feds.
We ordered one logo, just to make sure we could get the 70,000 in by, by September 1st. But as we get into the fall, we can obviously look at other options. But I have no issues with, working with all students wearing masks. But again, it would be the creativity of K and 1 teachers and how they work with our students to get them to encourage them to wear them and be safe. I agree 100%.
I think encourage is fine, but I also just want to put on the table, I understand those 2 teachers are concerned for their health, but if we go the hybrid model, there's just a few minutes that kids are getting in person. So is it worth teachers battling for students to put masks on versus getting that learning time that is so critical, especially if they're only going to be going to school those few days in person, especially the age group, which is so important, those fundamental skills. So that's something to just think about. Like, it's fine being encouraged, but just thinking about it in the classroom, and I understand what Superintendent Mike said about teachers are skilled, but is it worth using those minutes to that? Just something to think about.
That's a good point.
D'Agostino?
Not to keep going on this issue, but the other thing, I mean, okay, never mind, I'll just talk loud. So my son's in the age group that we're talking about. He'll be in kindergarten in September. And, just went back to school in pre-K this week. And, I think, to your point, I agree with you, and we're gonna have shields for teachers, masks for teachers. And the enforcement, to a point, you're right, that they're gonna have so much less teaching time than normal. And also, I would say that, enforcing and instilling the importance on that, of the masks also has to come from home too. We've been pushing him with masks for, wearing masks in public and out around other people for some time now. And he's pretty good about it, but, like the mayor said, with the younger kids, it's tough to get them to wear the thing for long periods of time, and they'll need breaks. But again, I think, we as parents also have to be pushing that with our kids, reminding them, keep your mask on, you gotta keep your mask on, it's uncomfortable, rather than, to your point, the little bit of class time they're gonna have turns into arguing about masks, rather than doing something here, again, this is probably something that'll get addressed if we're gonna do a formal statement about it in the addendums to the student handbooks anyway, at some point. But again, I think, like you said, encouraging it strongly, and also, again, asking parents to be our partners and reinforcing that at home is going to be, very important as well.
Any additional questions? If not, we'll move on to the next matter, please.
So I'm going to have Laurie Mason, Director of Special Ed, come down. Yep, the visitors. So guidance did come out regarding special ed education. So Laurie has been reviewing that with her team and with Sharon. There are some different recommendations for special education students, so I want to make sure Laurie went over that with us tonight. She's also meeting with parents and parent groups to talk to parents and obviously give them an open forum of discussing, how special ed children will come back to school.
So I've been meeting with the Department of Ed remotely since March 13th for the special education department, and the big push, or actually what they're saying for September, is that they want all students with disabilities who have significant disabilities to be in school full-time, regardless of what other plan is in place in the district. They really want students with disabilities to be able to attend school. So working with the Brockton team, I basically went and visited most schools, looked at their special education classrooms, and we're really talking about our substantially separate classrooms. students preschool to the Transition Academy at the Keith Center. So we're really looking at how can we support students attending school each day in that safe manner, 6 feet apart, 3 feet for instruction, providing the teachers all the gear that they need, and working with the students. Because the Department of Ed is really pushing that the students come in, because over this time between March and the end of June, the Department of Ed received multiple calls and emails from parents of students with disabilities, and what a struggle it was for them. And I think it was a struggle for a lot of families, but if you have a child that has a disability and we're asking them to sit in front of a Zoom lesson or a Teams lesson, and really, it's really the parent facilitating a lot of that instruction. So they're really looking at how can we safely bring kids to school and get them back into school. So I've worked with Sharon, and we, came up with a plan and met with Mike. And I think we do have a really solid plan for students with disabilities. Jess put out the survey today, and I had a lot of parents emailing me that they're really looking at the hybrid model. They really like that model because they feel like they're still concerned about their special ed students coming to school. And then some of our families are really saying, I wasn't happy with the remote learning because I had to sit with my child, but I'm not comfortable with my child even coming back to school. So I'm going to start meeting with families next week with the CPAC, and there's a high school group of parents I'm going to meet with, and just sharing concerns and just assuring them that we're going to provide their child with being safe in school and safe instruction. I was a little surprised at the survey results. I really was. They were like, oh no, they need to come to school a couple of days a week. And I'm like, oh, because the plan is, and the Department of Ed is posting this, is that students with disabilities come pretty much every single day. So we do have our 3 plans. We are working on, so I always say this, and I'm on all the calls, and I say, we could go back to school, and the governor could say, October 12th or 13th, we're all remote. All our students in Brockton, students with disabilities, gen ed students, we all have to be prepared to start that remote learning immediately. And I'm going to say this, we did a really good job in Brockton, considering we were told on March 12th or 11th, we're not coming back to school. And I feel strongly that we did a lot for our students. There was a team at Central that was continually working. I reached a lot of families, students with disabilities, and I met via Teams or Zoom with a lot of families that had a lot of questions, and we were able to provide them with a lot of guidance. I think we can do better, and I think that we have those plans in place for providing students with disabilities and our gen ed students with the best education we can give them. I have a call on Thursday. I have calls each week with Russell Johnston from Department of Ed, and I do have a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions because that's what we need to do. To make sure that we're providing the students with what they need. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. So next we have Kelly Jones, the Director of Bilingual Education, to talk to us about the guidance for bilingual students returning to school, and how that will look and what we need to do for our bilingual students as well.
Sorry, Lori.
Nothing personal, Kelly.
Thank you. So, good evening, everybody. I just want to kind of update you where we've come since the school went remote back in March. So, currently, as of today, we have 3,698 English learners in our district. That doesn't figure in the incoming kindergartners, and we finally received some guidance from the state for remote screening. So we'll be doing remote screening of incoming kindergartners beginning next week sometime. During the 1920 school year, we had 26.2% of our students were English learners. We ended the year with 4,300 English learners. We're talking about a large percentage of our population. We haven't had a new guidance come out from the state, but the initial guidance from DESE that came out in
May of 2020 states this: state and federal laws require school districts to provide access to academic content and to facilitate student progress towards English proficiency. School districts, including charter schools, need to adapt their English learner education service to account for remote learning. School districts must meet their legal obligations to English learners, even when students are learning remotely. So according to DESE's annual guidance that comes out, kind of what those parameters are this: all students must be placed with SEI-endorsed teachers for the core content. If they're in the foundational levels of English learning, English language acquisition, that's access levels 1 through 3, they need to receive 2 blocks of ESL per day, and a block is 45 minutes each. If they're in the transitional levels of English acquisition, meaning levels 3 to 5 on access, they require 1 block of ESL a day, and that's 45 minutes. So Brockton, given our kind of tiered instructional programming, we were able to remain in compliance even with the remote, and in any of the plans that we move forward on, we'll be able to remain in compliance. So if you look at the secondary level, middle and high school, ESL is a class that is scheduled in. It's a whole class. So when we went remote, those students were able to continue to get their ESL right from their ESL teacher. There was no kind of disruption in learning. In addition, in the secondary programs, core content teachers are endorsed. So those teachers were able to shelter their instruction for their students. At the elementary level, our self-contained and dual language classrooms were able to remain in compliance, not a problem, because they're duly licensed. So these teachers have both the core content license and an ESL license. So they were able to deliver ESL right in their classroom and continue that learning remotely. In addition, some of our self-contained and our dual language teachers speak the languages of their students. So they were able to communicate with their parents. They were able to communicate with their students and really help them use those native language skills to help them transition to a new way of learning. Some of the self-contained teachers, if they do not have some native language skills for our students, they had paraprofessionals, and paraprofessionals were really key in supporting the English learners through the remote learning and supporting their families. So in the integrated classrooms during remote learning, during regular learning, they're usually serviced by the building ESL teacher. When we went to remote learning last year, the ESL teacher worked with the students to have what DESE had recommended called choice boards. So those were language learning activities that could be done either online or offline, depending on their circumstance. So we were able to remain in compliance that way. ESL teachers also had office hours and Zoom meetings, so they were able to connect and keep that language learning going on for those students during remote learning. So we were able to provide equitable services for all our students, including English learners at those earliest proficiency levels. And I'm really proud of kind of the way Brockton came together to support its kids during remote learning. I'd also like to say that the district was able to really support the families who speak more than one language in the home. We have 15 bilingual community relation facilitators and 3 part-time advocates, and they all have district cell phones, so they were really lifelines to our families. They helped parents get Wi-Fi. They helped parents figure out how to log on. They were helping them find food pantries. They were helping them get food delivered if they were quarantined, and they were literal lifelines for our families. So when we think about reopening, the initial guidance on reopening schools says we have to have focused attention on equitable services for high needs populations, and English learners are part of that. So again, given our tiered structure of our programs in Brockton, and which factors in the students' level of proficiency and native language skills. I believe that we're going to be able to really craft something that meets both the equity lens, the equity needs of our students in Brockton, as well as our compliance for the hours of services for their. We're in a strong place to deliver those hours of ESL that are required. So again, in our elementary SEI, our dual language teachers, given that they are duly licensed, we're going to be able to provide those hours of ESL and the sheltered content that is outlined in the DESE annual guidance. For our integrated structured English immersion programs, we're going to have to kind of think a little bit differently. The initial plan is to put kids in some cohorts because we have as many students in our integrated settings as we do in our self-contained settings. They are really spread out through the building. So in order to minimize student interactions and teacher-to-student interactions, we're going to implement a cohorting system. And so the preliminary plan is for the ESL teachers to push into the ISEI classrooms with those cohorts to provide the ESL instruction, and to provide consecutive language learning activities and opportunities if they are in a hybrid situation as well. The district will also prioritize its multilingual support to the families in whatever structure or structures that are established. This includes translation of all family engagement and health and safety protocols, use of the community facilitators and ELL parent advocates to assist parents. We've talked about multilingual training for technology and more. So, I want to thank you all for everything that you've done for the kids in Brockton during this unprecedented time. The commitment shown by Brockton Public Schools, by all the stakeholders, has made and will continue to make all the difference in our families. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions at all? None? Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly.
So that is it, Mr. Mayor, for the report of the superintendent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Superintendent. And then subsection B of section 5 is a ratification of an MOA between Brockton Food Service Association, SEIU Local 888. Mr. Sullivan, please.
Yes, if I could speak on that. In late October of 2019, early November of 2019, we had a couple of meetings, and then because of health reasons with the union, there was no more meetings. And then the holidays came around, Christmas, and then COVID-19 came, and we went to remote negotiations. One time it was done on Zoom, and one time it was done over the phone. And it really didn't work out well. In this agreement, I just wanted to add that this agreement is from September 1st, 2019 to August 31st of 2020, which is coming right up. These people have been working without a contract for almost a year right now. The original proposal was a $10 an hour increase, which we almost fell over when we heard that. We have settled between the HR department, our law department, and the superintendent at 75 cents per hour, which is the lowest paid out of all non-certified unions in the city of Brockton. And there's a lot of language changes that do not cost anything, but in the MOA, it looks like a lot. But I just wanted to say that it is 75 cents per hour for each food service employee for the city of Brockton. And this, I'll repeat again, it's only for 1 year, which will end August 31st, which is next month. So we'll have to start over again. And I would like to put it in as a motion that we accept this Everybody has it in their packet, and we accept it as written. And just wanted to mention that the subcommittee for this non-certified negotiation team has approved it unanimously, and I'm putting it forward to the full committee to be approved as well.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for the summary. Any questions of the school committee members to Mr. Sullivan? Seeing none. Mr. Sullivan, you made it a form of a motion.
Yes.
Is there a second on that motion? Second by Judy. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries, it passes. And Melinda had informed me that at the conclusion of the meeting, before you leave, we all have to sign it, okay? So please don't leave without executing it. We'll go on to C now, which is items to refer to subcommittee. Vice Chair.
And I suspect the superintendent was going in the same direction. The superintendent and I spoke earlier. We need to call a policy committee meeting and wanted to see if the committee had next Tuesday available, correct? Yeah.
Yep.
Tuesday is the 28th. And could we do that here at 6 o'clock?
Any objections on that? It's a form of
All
a
right.
motion. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Is there a second? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. So it's a policy subcommittee next Tuesday, July 28th, 6 PM here in the Little Theater.
All right. And the second thing I wanted to bring up, we had a schedule that we had laid out for superintendent contract review. I'd like to push all of that back till August till we can get past this reopening stuff. You know, we got to do it, but I think we could push that back a little further.
Any
if everybody's
objections, Mr.
okay.
Superintendent?
No.
None for the record. You want to do a
Okay.
date certain, or just say it's fluid until the month of August and we'll figure it out?
Yeah, I think we leave it fluid. August 1st, we'll propose some dates and get it done.
Okay, that's a form of a motion.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Sullivan, second. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries. Anything else, Mr. Vice?
So I'm also, Mr. Mayor, if we can schedule a special school committee meeting for Tuesday, August 4th. So the committee at that time can make a decision on how we will reopen school. I just think it's fair for our staff, especially our parents, that I know the Department of Ed has given us the date of August 10th. But I do feel that it's important for us to make an earlier decision and let our parents and staff know what we're planning on, how we plan to come back to school. And also, I just going back to Mr. DiAugustino with the night of the policy subcommittee, if maybe we can schedule, and we'll talk to cable, if we can maybe schedule something for parents.
Oh,
A
thank you.
Zoom, a
Yes.
Zoom meeting with parents, maybe right before that policy, just to get their feedback, like kind of like a town hall. We could be here and we could do something. We'll have to talk to Mike Simmons. Maybe we schedule that for like a 5:30 to 6:30 and then
Yeah.
have the subcommittee at 6:30, because the subcommittee will be a little lengthy because we really want to go over we'll go over the 3 plans and, you know, fully. We will talk about PPE, we'll talk about transportation, and really go over everything, you know, from top to bottom. So when we make a decision on August 4th, obviously it's very informed, and the mayor would be able to also provide us more details about what's going on in the city as far as cases. So I just think that's a timeline we need to set up, so we're making decisions in best interest of our families and our staff and our students as well.
So, just a caveat, the superintendent suggested 6:30. We had already voted for 6, so do you want to make a modification on that?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we hold a public comment session from 5:30 to 6:30, and then at 6:30, we will pick up and have a policy subcommittee meeting, and that would be this upcoming Tuesday, the 28th.
It's a form of a motion.
Second.
Second, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. And then also superintendent suggested a special school committee meeting for Tuesday, August 4th, 6 PM here in Little Theater. I entertain a motion on that, please.
Motion? Oh, good.
Motion to make a special meeting Tuesday, August 4th at 6 PM at
Second.
the Little Theater. here.
Motion made by Mr. Sullivan, seconded by Mr. D'Agostino. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Simmons, Mike, quick question for you. We were hoping to do next Tuesday, 5:30 to 6:30, a Zoom or something like that, and then go into the subcommittee. Is that okay? Thank you, Mr. Simmons. I want to publicly thank Mike Simmons and everybody at BCA. They're awesome, awesome, unbelievable.
He's been great since,
Oh.
ever since we went remote, and
Yeah.
then we appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so we will now go on to agenda item number 6, which is Unfinished Business Student Opportunity Act, SOA 3-year district plan.
And again, we're holding on this until we see what the budget comes out is, and if the state is gonna hold and come up with any of the Student Opportunity Act money. I know the plan is due by August 14th. There's no indication of whether they're gonna basically move that date again. If they don't move it, then we'll have a meeting, we'll decide, we'll look at the plan that's been developed, and then we'll submit a plan when we have to, but it'd be nice to know what they're gonna do with the Student Opportunity Act money, if some of that money is gonna come forward. But we'll talk about that before the August 14th.
Also, just want to give a status update if I could. I had my every other week call with the state delegation today. Rep. Cassidy and Cronin couldn't join. They were in session relative to, I think, subcommittees. But Senator Brady's aide Al was on, and also Rep. Dubois. I specifically asked again, hey, do we have an update on Chapter 70? You know what I mean? Where's the 70? They don't have that number yet. So we'll just keep banging the drum, right? I mean, Alder was on, and Troy Clarkson, so we'll just keep doing that. Just wanted to give an update on that. We will now go on to number 7 on the agenda, which is new business subcommittee meetings. Brockton
One
High
question,
Little Theater.
unfinished, on the
So-
unfinished business. I know the graduation is this week. Do you have,
I have the detail, I got the
Oh, you're bringing it
details
up later? Okay.
Under, at the end for,
okay,
yep.
I withdraw.
All right. Any subcommittee meetings, BHS Little Theater, anything on that matter? Did them, right?
We had to
No,
take an official vote.
Yeah, we need to take a vote. We had voted at one point to hold all full subcommittees at our known, so we need to make a vote to reverse that
That's
for the
right.
time being.
That's right. Entertain a motion?
Motion to hold all committees of the, subcommittees of the whole here at the Little Theater at Brockton High.
Second.
Motion was made by Mr. D'Agostino, seconded by Mr. Sullivan. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. The next matter is create, of course, the new subcommittee, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, that Mr. D'Agostino talked about. We have to take a formal vote on that, so you want to entertain a motion?
Yep, I'd like to make a motion that we create a new standing subcommittee of the Brockton School Committee, which would be, where is it? The Race, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Subcommittee. And also, that committee would have Cynthia Mendez as the chair, and Tony Rodriguez and Tom Minicello as the other 2 members. And then I believe the committee had agreed in the retreat that we would have a student member recommended by the principal of Brockton High, as well as a community member that would be recommended by the subcommittee itself. And the student member and community member would be non-voting members, but obviously would be at the table and be able to give feedback and be heard by that subcommittee, who could then bring that information and that feedback to the full committee.
So there's 2 matters before us right now. The first one is the actual formal vote to ratify and create the existence of this new subcommittee. And then the second matter is the 3 named members, Cynthia, Tony, and Tom, to serve in that capacity, not in perpetuity, but take my city council hat off. Is it a year
Yeah,
appointment on the subcommittee?
the subcommittee appointments are all up every January,
Okay,
they're up.
so it'll be for the current year. So those are really, they're kind of tied in, but one is the permanent creation of the subcommittee.
All right, so I'll make a motion to create the Race, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Subcommittee.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. D'Agostino, second by Mr. Sullivan. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries.
And I'd like to make a motion naming Cynthia Mendez as the chair, and the other 2 members of the committee to be Tom Minicello and Tony Rodriguez.
Second.
For this legislative year.
Oh, for this legislative year.
Second.
Motion was made by Mr. D'Agostino, second by Mr. Sullivan. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you for your willing to serve on that, too. Mr. Hextino.
I have one other item, I just, more of an ask of the committee. I haven't heard from all of you yet about graduation schedules and coordinating buildings, so if you could see me, I know we have to get the contract signed anyway, so I'll stick around, and I've heard from Mr. Minicello and Ms. Azak, so if the rest of you can just make sure you see me at some point before the end of the night, so I can make sure we get all that scheduled, and I can get to the superintendent on that.
Sure. What else do we have? All right, so that was new business. We'll go on to 8, which is executive session. We don't have any before us tonight, so we can move on to adjournment. But before that, I know the superintendent wanted to give details relative to Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of this week.
So I thank Jess for sending the information out to our senior parents. And again, I want to thank the mayor and Dr. Herman, who was here earlier, who met with us back in May.
Yeah.
To come up with a plan for this in-person graduation, which I knew, and we all know how important it was to our students and families to have an in-person graduation. And we were only one of the few school districts that are doing it in person. So most stayed and did a virtual, or they did the car parade. And I just want to thank the committee for their commitment to have an in-person, and the mayor and Dr. Herman for having a commitment to doing an in-person graduation. And also I want to thank Dr. Murray and Principal Jay Lanner, Principal Cynthia Burns, and Dr. Cobbs, Principal of the Edison, for their hard work, and their teams for, and Jess for getting this all set up in the facilities department. So the weekend has finally come. The weather is going to break, which is really good news. The weather looks like it's not going to be as humid. It's going to be partly sunny in the low 80s for, it looks like, all 3 days. So it looks good. We can make a decision on, how we want to dress. Obviously, knowing we're going to be out in the sun, so, we can decide that together on if you want to go business casual, because it is going to be warm during the day, so we can talk about that together. But again, I'm just thrilled that we're able to do this for our families. So Friday, July 24th at 5 p.m., this is the schedule. The Huntington, the Champion High School, and the Frederick Douglass Academy. Again, Friday, July 24th at 5 p.m. Again, these are all at Marciano Stadium. And then Saturday, July 25th, Brockton High School's Yellow Building will be at 10 a.m. And then again on Saturday, July 25th, Brockton High School's Green Building at 1 p.m. And then Saturday, July 25th will be the Edison Academy at 3 p.m. And then on Sunday, we have Sunday, July 26th will be Brockton High School's Red Building at 10 a.m. And then at 1 p.m. will be Brockton High School's Azure Building on Sunday, the 26th. The second graduation for the Edison Academy is not going to be needed. We do have enough room under the guidelines for all Edison Academy graduates to graduate on Saturday at 3 p.m. So the 3 p.m. time, which was to be announced, is not needed for the second Edison Academy. So the last graduation on Sunday will be the Azure Building at 1 p.m. So that's the schedule for this weekend.
What time do you want us to get there before?
Yeah, so on Friday, if we can all arrive at least by 4:30, as you know, there's no procession. That's not allowed. So we just meet and go right onto the field. Our seats will be marked. And then on Saturday, if you could arrive by 9:30, and the same for Sunday by 9:30 if you're coming for the 10 a.m. And we ask all parents and graduates, and just it's to be in their seats 10 minutes before the start.
Indicates 15 minutes before.
15, so if they could be in their seats, so if you have obviously a 10 a.m. graduation, we're asking for graduates and the parents to be in the stadium 15 minutes prior to the start of their graduation time. So that's been sent out. We'll send it out again before Friday, and another text message and message to families. So again, we know it was not easy with the 2 tickets, but those are strict guidelines laid out by the Board of Health. And again, it's not a normal year, obviously, where we can have 15,000 people in the stadium, so we had to go with the 2 tickets, but, you know, it's a requirement, it's about safety, and again, we ask everybody to cooperate with what's been put in place. And I also want to thank Lieutenant Fedaro and for helping us plan. The Brockton Fire Department will be there, along with EMS, so everything will be in place for the safety of all the guests and the graduates.
Any questions at all relative?
I got a question.
Judy, please.
Will they be on BCA afterward, or?
Yes, yep, live streamed.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other
Yeah,
questions?
Mike was nice enough to meet, and we met up there last week to go over the setup, how the chairs will be set up. As you know, there'll be no tent. There's no tents allowed, so we won't have that tent, you know, that we all can sit under. We'll be spread out across, obviously socially distanced near the podium. There will be a table set up where the diploma has to go on for the graduate to take off the table. There cannot be a hand-to-hand pass. And obviously, there'll be plenty of wipes, you know, disinfectant wipes. Everything will be sprayed down before it'll be all disinfected, but in between graduations, the facilities team will disinfect all chairs and also the bleachers. The stands will all be sprayed down with the, with the disinfectant electrostatic guns, and all the chairs as well. So everything will be done according to the plan that we came up with Dr. Herman. So we thank you for everybody for sticking with this, and I think it's really important for our graduates who obviously deserve this.
Any other questions relative to that? Then I entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Second by Judy. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries. Have a good evening, everybody.